Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Moraine. I'm the director of the New Israel Fund of Canada. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we're here in Toronto, and we're on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and that this is now home to many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I'm really glad to see you here tonight because I'm heartbroken. I've been heartbroken for months. I'm heartbroken for my own people, the Jewish people, and also heartbroken for another people, the Palestinian people. And these feelings of mutual pain have sometimes made me feel a little lonely. But this room tonight is filled with people just like me. People who are striving, despite their own pain and despite many barriers, to hold two peoples in their hearts at the same time. There's a lot of different kind of people in this room. I see Jews, Palestinian, Arab, Muslims, many old friends, and lots of new faces too. I see members of our two co-presenters, both local joint Jewish-Palestinian organizations, Friends of Standing Together, and Heart to Heart. Heart to Heart is a youth leadership program for Palestinian and Jewish citizens of Israel rooted in a summer camp right here in Ontario. Friends of Standing Together is the new international support network for Standing Together, and you'll hear from them, from two of their Canadian leaders, John Meadow and Yafa Sikeja, at the end of the program. And there will be information at the back of the room. You have an opportunity to meet them. I also see in the room musician Naomi Tesler, who wrote and recorded that beautiful song you heard walking in, which she wrote inspired by Standing Together, entitled Possible. I'm so honored to see with us three Canadian elected officials here tonight, our longtime friend, Minister Yara Sachs, and Ontario MPPs Jessica Bell and Jill Andrew. Thank you. Thank you for choosing to be seen here tonight. We have a lot of kinds of people in this room, and I'm sure that we don't all agree precisely on how to get out of this bloody and endless cycle of violence. And that's okay. I suspect many of you here tonight are just like me, just simply tired of the heartbreak, desperate for a way out that is fair to all of us, to both peoples. And I definitely feel that what some of our communal leaders have been selling us these past 5 months has been more one-sidedness, more exclusivity of victimhood, more division, and even more hate. And in some ways, I don't blame them. They are scared. I'm scared. They are exhausted. We're exhausted too. They're afraid for their own safety and that of their loved ones on the streets of our own cities. And I am too. But we have something that I think they don't, and I wish some of them were here tonight to benefit from what we have and what we will see. A small candle of hope that Jews and Palestinians can stand together. And I think it's easy to stand together with people you agree with completely on everything. But that's not the task asked of us in this moment. Can we stand together across differences, across political divides, across even differing solutions to the crisis in front of us? The reasons that our organization, the New Israel Fund of Canada, has for bringing Standing Together to Toronto tonight is because not only is their work on the ground a hopeful antidote to the despair plaguing us, but also because their work has lessons for us in Canada. 8 years ago, our organization took a bet on funding Standing Together when they were just an idea. We seed funded a series of new initiatives by progressives in Israeli civil society, producing new ideas, new leaders, and new movements. Our work in Israel has always been to convene and fuel progressive Israelis fighting for equality and democracy, and against religious extremism, against ultranationalism, and against occupation. Our funded NGOs have been behind Israel's most important victories for gender equality, religious freedom, disabilities rights, human rights, you name it. These things that have made Israel the imperfect, fragile, at-risk democracy that it is today. And for us, that work has always included support for dozens of Jewish, Arab, joint, shared society organizations. 8 years ago, Standing Together didn't set out to be a peace group. They set out, and we funded them to be, a joint Jewish-Arab movement for social and economic equality. And we proudly funded their initial growth and have been by their side every day since then. Their campaigns have always been from a place of finding common cause between Jewish and Palestinian neighbors, and they've won critical battles in Israel on things like raising Israel's minimum wage. And then October 7th happened, and this Gaza war happened. We are still missing 134 Israeli hostages, and 30,000 Palestinians have died. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis and millions of Gazans are displaced from their homes. 1.7 million Gazans are facing starvation in a human-made famine. The hate on our streets is real. The anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are sky high. We're afraid, and compassion seems in short supply. Many people feel they have to pick a side. They are being made to feel that this conflict is a zero-sum game. Either you hashtag stand with Israel or demand hashtag free Palestine. But the New Israel Fund and our partners, including Standing Together, are saying something different. We know that the only way to get through this, that the only way all of our peoples will survive, is if we do it together. Standing Together is a movement that has gone into overdrive over the past 5 months, and whose members, led by people like Rula and Itamar tonight, are doing something that seems to others like a fool's errand. They are insisting on peace, solidarity, and a shared future. They answered the moment in a way beyond what they were constituted to do. And so last October and November, I was astounded to see Standing Together convening events across Israel of hundreds and even thousands of Jews and Palestinians. And every week on social media, another photo and another photo of these mixed crowds holding up these purple posters. In Tel Aviv, in Haifa, in Jerusalem, in Lod, in Abu Ghosh, in Baqa al-Garabia. In this time of polarization and enormous fear, they were growing. And here's the truth, so are we, the organizations represented in this room and the constituency that you represent. Standing Together is visiting dozens of cities with a number of speakers over the past few weeks and in the weeks to come, drawing audiences like this one that we could not have imagined before October 7th. Unthinkable. We're seeing a groundswell of local Canadians, Americans across the states, joining in to create Friends of Standing Together, starting groups in Canada and Toronto, like Coexistence, getting involved in Heart to Heart, the camp here, and increasingly giving donations to groups like the New Israel Fund, to the point that we raised from just $1 million a year ago to $2 million by the end of last year. We are seeing thank you. We're seeing movement here, a groundswell of people searching, hungry for alternatives from the one-sidedness, from the division, and towards something that will help all of us get out of this together. And so they're here in Toronto, helping us carve out this new space for the message we have always known and have always said. Any real future in this troubled region must be a shared one. Standing together offers a message of truth, of hope, and togetherness at a time when these things can feel so very far away. They represent ideas that are society's best shot for a peaceful future, and a powerful lesson for us here at home. If they can do it where they are, given the closeness of what they have experienced, the tragedy of it all, surely we can too. If they can do it, we can do it. So to talk about how do they do it, and what can we learn, what is unique about where they are, and what is universal that could work here, I'm delighted to introduce Mira, Rula, and Itamar. Professor Mira Sucharov is our moderator tonight. She's a member of the New Israel Fund of Canada's Advisory Council. She's a professor of political science at Carleton, where she specializes in Israel-Palestine. She's the author of a number of books on Israel-Palestine, including the most recent one, Borders and Belonging, a Memoir. She's currently working with Omar Dajani, a podcast about Palestinian and Jewish life in Jaffa called The Vacant Lot, and also with Omar, working on a book about equality and attachment in Israel-Palestine. She's on the U.S. steering committee of another NIF-funded group, A Land for All, 2 states, 1 homeland. She will be interviewing Rula Daood, who's the national co-director of Standing Together, and she's a speech pathologist by profession, a Palestinian citizen of Israel, born and raised in the Galilee region. Before Standing Together, Rula worked as a community organizer that drew hundreds of thousands of activists. Itamar Avneri is a community organizer, founding member of Standing Together, a prominent LGBTQ voice, and just 3 weeks ago was elected to Tel Aviv Jaffa's City Council. Welcome to all 3 of you. Mira, take it away.
Excellent. And if I could be prosaic for a second, when I walked around, I dropped my pen. So if you're able to bring me one, I would love that. All right, it'll save me from typing on my phone, and that won't look very good. It is such an honor to be here with you both. We have watched your organization blossom for not a great reason, but for a wonderful, thank you, for a wonderful mandated mission. So tell us, some of us know about Standing Together very well, some of us are new to it, some of us have seen the coverage in the New York Times, we've seen your purple and white branding, your logo, you're out there, and tell us a bit about it. What does it stand for? We'll start with you, Rula.
Yeah, of course. Can you hear me? Because we can't hear ourselves, so, yeah? Yeah, higher? Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for having us. I must say it's always overwhelming to come and see, hundreds of people sit down and want to understand how can we really continue a fight for peace, for justice, for equality in times where we see our societies and our governments become more radical. So thank you so much for coming here tonight. And thank you for coming. You do very good. Well, standing together is that purple color, a purple color that started at late 2015 and was able in the last 8 years to organize and mobilize people, both Jews and Palestinians, in the Israeli society, inside of Israel, towards issues of ending the occupation, peace, Israeli-Palestinian peace, social justice, economic justice, and climate justice. And when we started, we didn't know that a day like this, would come and we would wake up to sirens one morning and not just see a horrible attack and a massacre and people we know being killed, being kidnapped. And we didn't really understand that our government, the Israeli government, would just retaliate by bombing innocent people for 5 months, killing more than 30,000 Palestinians, 14,000 kids and having starvation to a whole nation. But being able to work and have a network of activists for the last 8 years, both Jews and Palestinians back home, enabled us to stand up to say, we are all afraid, we are all traumatized. The 7th of October was a very different day from the days we've known before. And believe me, we've had too many wars. And we know when a war is coming. We have a build-up for that war. But the 7th of October was a different day. And it was a different day, not just because of the atrocities happened at that day and the 5 months after it, but it was a different day because most of the people, and when I say people, I talk about the Israeli society, people living in Israel, understood that something changed and that the status quo that we had couldn't be maintained anymore, and that we need a change. We need other solutions. We need different political solutions. And since the 7th of October, the only thing we have been doing is to build a people's movement for peace of Jews and Palestinians from within the Israeli society, because we believe, and it is a strong belief that we have, that the only one that can really save us from the politics that we have right now is us, the people. The people living back home in Israel and in Palestine. And our work since then have been in organizing people, mobilizing them, inviting them to conventions, demonstrating, calling out for a ceasefire agreement that will bring back the hostages and end the killing of innocent people in Gaza. And that is the main thing we've been working on since the last 5 months. And thank you so much for coming here and showing your support to us and to the work we do. And believe me, we have so much work to do when we go back home.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Itamar, please add to anything Rula said, but I'm also going to tag another question onto you, is to tell us about how you came to this work. You grew up in Israeli society, you're part of the dominant majority, you're a Hebrew speaker, you're Jewish. What made you want to get involved in this kind of work, which is a pretty uphill battle for many people?
So before I started, I do want to say, for me, it's the first time since October 7th that I'm abroad. And it was really hard decision to come. Not because it's not nice here, you're all very nice, we're happy to be here. But because, as Rula said, on our end, war is raging for 5.5 months now. Innocent people are dying in masses in Gaza. We're still waiting for the hostages to come back. Children are starving, the hostages are starving, and it feels like in Israel, in the Israeli society, we're free-falling. And our government, the Israeli government, is tearing us apart with Israeli officials, Israeli ministers releasing, I know it's going to be triggering for some of you, so I do apologize, but releasing genocidal statements, talking about nuking Gaza, talking about expelling everybody, and it was hard for us to come here, to decide to leave the movement for 3 weeks and not being home with all the other activists on the streets. But we decided to come because we know it is important to say as explicitly as we can in English what we're saying in Arabic and Hebrew when we are back home. We demand an immediate ceasefire agreement to stop the war and the killing in Gaza. We demand an agreement so we will be able to bring back the hostages home, and we demand an Israeli-Palestinian peace because we know that only Israeli-Palestinian peace will give all of us what we all deserve, which is freedom and independence and justice and safety. And this is what we are trying to do in Israel, and this is what we are trying to do now. And I do want to say, and then I will answer the question, I promise you, that we need your help. Our work is inside the Israeli society, as Rula said, but we do need your help. And we come here to ask you, please believe in us And please, really please, do not leave us alone in this fight, because we must win this fight. This is the fight of our lives. Now, how I came to all this work, I mean, maybe I can speak about how we founded Standing Together, and that will answer the question. Standing Together was founded in late 2015, but I do want to start the story 4 years prior to that. In 2011, we had a social protest in Israel, our version of the Arab Spring in the Arab countries, Occupy Wall Street. Maybe you had something also here in Canada. I don't know. I just don't know. And you know, if you're taking into account the size of the Israeli population, that protest was the biggest in the world. In one night in Tel Aviv, 500,000 people were marching. It's like 23 million Americans marching on Times Square in New York on one night. And we shouted together a very special slogan that actually we took from the Kikar Tahrir Square in Egypt. There they shouted, "Ashayib Yorid Iskatel Nidam." The people demand to overthrow the regime, which is not a bad idea. And what we shouted in Arabic and in Hebrew was, "Ashayib Yorid Adala Ijtimaiya, Ha'am Doresh Tzedek Chavrati." The people demand social justice. And when we said the people, for the first time in the history of Israel, we didn't mean the Jewish people. We didn't mean the Palestinian people. We just meant the people, all of the people. Now, I was a mere protester at the time, and I felt completely lonely because I was surrounded with tens and hundreds of thousands of people, but no one asked me who I was. No one asked me why I came. No one asked me if I want to do something. We were the majority, the overwhelming majority, but we were not organized, and subsequently, we lost. The government just disregarded all of our demands. The prime minister was back then Benjamin Netanyahu, and we just all went home, and I was always very political. So when it all happened, I started to look for another way for me to be involved. So I decided to go and volunteer in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. I went to volunteer at the chamber of Dov Hamin. He's a very well-known, he was an MK back then. He's a well-known figure in the Israeli left. And I met there some people. Some of them were the leaders of the social protest. And we always talked about how maybe one day we will have the opportunity to do something else. And then the opportunity came. It was a terrible opportunity. In 2015, the Intifada of the loneliness broke. It was called the Intifada of the loneliness or the Intifada of the knives. Terrible time. Palestinians were afraid. Jewish people were afraid. There were attacks on the streets. People were murdered. And one night, our prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, went out to the public and said, "I am being asked whether we will always live by the sword." And the answer, he added, is yes. Think about it. He was being asked whether we will always live by the sword, whether we will always fight, always kill and be killed, and his answer was yes. And the crazy thing was that almost no one in the political system in Israel tried to challenge him. Almost no one tried to say, "What are you talking about? Let's find another way." And so we've decided that if no one is going to give us hope from above, we are going to build hope from below, from the streets. And we declared a demonstration in Jerusalem, a peace demonstration. It was October 17, if I'm not mistaken, 2015. We expected something like 300 people, maybe if we're lucky, 400 people. 3,000 came. And then we marched in Haifa, and we marched in the triangle area, and we marched in the Negev in the south, and we marched in Tel Aviv. And so many people came, and we understand that all those people are in desperate need of hope. And so we've decided, with the lessons of the social protest, in our mind that we are not going only to mobilize all these people, we are going to organize all these people. We are going to build a movement, people's movement, as Rula said, a movement that will work, just like this slogan from 2011, will work for all the people. A movement that will enable us and will enable us to build the power, people's power, in order to demand social justice and ending the occupation and lifting the blockade and Israeli-Palestinian peace and equality inside Israel. And that movement came to be, Makif Man, Omdim B'Yachad, standing together. And that's how I basically founded myself in this work.
Great. I'm glad to hear you say that social justice for you was a very broad undertaking and didn't only include the price of cottage cheese, as important as that was. And that was one of the, for those who remember the tent protests, I mean, the cottage cheese was a symbol of rising consumer costs, but of course housing was the big issue. Yeah. And I remember writing a piece at the time in Haaretz criticizing, maybe I was too narrow, maybe I wasn't listening enough. Maybe I wasn't hearing enough, because I was criticizing the chant, "We demand social justice," because I said, where is the non-economic platform here? Where is the anti-occupation message? Where is the anti-blockade message? But I think it was there all along, and then you've really both identified it here, embodied it here in Standing Together. Rula, what brought you to this work?
Okay, so I am a speech therapist. I had my first degree in Tel Aviv University, and maybe I will start by talking just a bit. As you know, I am a Palestinian. I'm a Palestinian citizen of Israel, and it is important to me to just explain a bit. I am part of the Palestinian people, but also part of the Israeli society. I am what we say one of the lucky ones. My grandparents at the war of 1948, which we call Nakba, and for Israelis it's independence. Nakba means catastrophe. My grandparents were forced to leave their homes, but then they were lucky because they were able to come back. So I was not born as a refugee, not even a refugee inside of Israel. I was born in the city of my grandparents. But many others were not able to stay, expelled, killed at 1948. So 21% of the population in Israel are Palestinian. More than 4 million people in the West Bank, Palestinians, under the military occupation of Israel, and 2.2 Palestinians in Gaza who have been under siege for 17 years, and now the war and the bombings. So, and I said that because I want you to understand the differences that are found, and maybe also the complexity of my identity and the place I come from. But when it comes to politics, it's not that complicated. I was born third generation to the Nakba. My parents were born through the martial laws, years where Israel had martial laws on the cities and the villages, the Palestinian ones, in the north and in the center. So I was brought up in a very non-political home, because if you speak up, then you will be persecuted. That is what my parents have endured. And that is most of my generation. So we become political, if we become political, not in a really early age. And for most of us, our parents want us to just like go, get your degree, work, have a career, get married, bring kids, and that's it. But when we turn 18, and it's basically the first time we go out and meet, the Jewish Israeli society in Israel, and mostly it's in college for most of us, we understand that we are a minority and what it means to be a minority. And I think it's like kind of a slapping you in the face again and again and again. And life becomes, you have small acts of discrimination, racism, and it happens in many places. At work, getting a job, renting an apartment, not having, the same fee when you go to work, and small instance of real discrimination. And for me, the first moment I understood that I have lived in a society in a country that looks at me as a threat was at the airport. And unfortunately, it's not, it's a common thing for most Palestinians in Israel. When I finished my degree, I wanted to travel, and I had money. I saved up a bit, and I chose to travel to Italy. And when I came to the airport, I know there was going to be a different line of questioning. But then, before going to the airplane, I was asked to go to another security check. And I was told it is a random security check for my safety. And I went to a small room, and I was asked to strip off, to take off my clothes, to be frisked by somebody I did not know. And all of that was, while somebody was saying, we are sorry, this is random check, it's for your safety. And I knew that I was the only Arab on that airplane, and I was the only one asked to go to a small room. And the feeling of humiliation I had at that moment, understanding that, I am like this little person in this big system, and I just wanted to travel and have some fun before, going to real life. And this is what I get from the place that calls, a country to me. That was the first moment, I had this kind of a humiliating event that made me understand that I needed to do something different. But I went 3 weeks to Italy and I had fun. I did. I did. And when I came back, I was already a speech therapist, so I started working. I was working in a clinic in Ashdod, which is in the south of Israel, and it's close to the borders with Gaza. It's really close. And in 2014, it was, again, one of the harshest wars on Gaza. And when the siren stopped and we were able to go back to work, to the clinic, one morning, the morning basically people started going back to work, I went to this bakery I always go to, and 7:30 in the morning, and the bakery had a newspaper. And the newspaper, the first page, had the faces of all of the Palestinian kids who were killed by the Israeli bombings. And a woman who was standing next to me and just looked at the pictures, and she said, I hope they all die. I hope they all burn. Let them die. They deserve it. And in these situations, we usually shut up because I was like the only Arab in the bakery, and maybe in Ashdod itself. But I couldn't, because you were looking at a picture of babies. Like, you had too many babies killed. How can you say something like that? And I just found myself kind of replying and saying, you're right. They should all burn. And then me and you can go to the rooftop of this building and listen to the kids in Gaza screaming while they are being burned alive. And at that moment, there was silence in the bakery. Nobody said anything. And I think it was the first moment she understood what she really said, like wishing for kids to die. And that was the moment I decided I didn't want to be a speech therapist anymore. And I started looking for a political home. I couldn't find one easily. And the first time I met standing together was 2.5 years after. We were in a demonstration, a bunch of lefties, and against the right-wing extremists in what they call Jerusalem Day. It's a day where settlers from the West Bank march with Israeli flags in the streets of the old city to just provoke Palestinians. And I was standing there waiting for somebody to say anything because we were supposed to be demonstrating. And there was a woman with a purple shirt. And the purple shirt had, was written in it in Arabic and in Hebrew, نقف معا عمدين بياخد. And she had a megaphone. And what she did was just climb the wall and took the megaphone and started shouting in Arabic and in Hebrew. And we just shouting back. She was shouting and we shouted back about equality, about ending the occupation, about peace. And then she just went down and kept marching, and everybody just marched. And we went inside of the old city of Jerusalem. And that was the first time I could feel related to anything political that, first of all, spoke my language, believed in the principles I believe in, ending the occupation, having equality for people, and just seeing a woman, stepping off and screaming and everybody just following her, it felt like this is the place I can be part of. And since 2017, I'm an activist in Standing Together. Thank you. Apparently until this day.
Great. Well, they're lucky to have you both.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about how the focus of your organization has shifted or expanded since October 7th and the war in Gaza. Yeah, start, Itamar.
So prior to October 7, on September, I think, we were about to launch our housing campaign. There's a big problem, housing crisis in Israel. But then October 7 came, and the first fear actually was that just like what happened 2.5 years prior to October 7 on May 2021 during the Guardian of the Walls war, that violence is going to erupt also in the mixed cities in Israel between Jews and Arabs. So one of the first things we done, and we had to do that, and we did it on October 8th actually, was to create joint Jewish-Arab solidarity guards to de-escalate the atmosphere, to convey a message of a shared future, to say that we don't have to be enemies of each other. And basically what we were trying to do was to stop our government from inciting that violence, because Itamar Ben-Gvir, whom I suppose you all heard about, and a Kahanist, fascist, dangerous man, he told the Jewish citizens of Israel that the Palestinian citizens of Israel are going to pogrom them any minute now, any moment now. The pogrom is on the way. So the first thing we had to do was to form those solidarity guards. We blanketed the cities with posters of de-escalation, with messages of de-escalation and shared future and responsibility, shared responsibility for our society. We had dozens of meetings all around the country. 2 weeks after October 7, we started to do big conferences with those exact messages. We started in Tel Aviv, 400 people came. During the alarms, during the war, then we moved to Haifa, 800 people came. Then we moved to Jerusalem, another 400 people came. We were in Bakr al-Gharbia, 2,000, I can't remember, 2,000 or 3,000 people came. We did it in Beersheba and in many other places. And really the first mission was to stop the violence or to prevent violence to occur. And we did it, we succeeded. There was no violence in the mixed cities between Jews and Arabs. So that was one thing we had to do. But then, or parallel to that work, we also had to start working toward a ceasefire agreement. And maybe you want to talk about that?
And while doing that, not just showing that people, citizens of Israel, both Jews and Palestinians, stood together during, a month that was horrifying to all of us, we also understand, back home, there is a fact. It is a very simple fact. And I think the 7th of October made it much more clear to the most people that, the status quo have changed. And it can't go back to the same place. And we also realized a very, a strong fact that back home you have two people living. You have the Jewish people and you have the Palestinian people. And one fact is that nobody is going anywhere. So again, we have another war, and this war is much more dangerous from the ones we've had before. So this is the time to understand what do we do different in order to bring different solutions. How can we really build a people's movement that understand that if we want to live in peace for both sides, if we want security, the security for the Jewish people living in Israel is dependent on the independence of the Palestinians living in Gaza and also in the West Bank. And the independence of the Palestinian people is also goes with the security of the Jewish people living in it. And that was the main message we say to people. And after people felt that the 7th of October have changed and made it more radical, people also understood that they needed different solutions. And not just that, our government, the Israeli government, kind of gave up on people. The only message, the more radical, in our government we have 50 shades of right. We have no left voice. It is 50 shades of right, and that's it. And they're kind of fighting who's more radical.
50 shades of light.
Shades, maybe, yes. What we wanted to do is to bring different voice. We know that in our politics, in the Israeli society, there is no voice that had spoken after the 7th of October of anything instead of continuing wars, bombing Gaza again and again. Our ministers said that we will keep bombing Gaza until we will destroy the last one of Hamas. But yet again, we see that the government isn't bombing Hamas. And in fact, with each and every bomb that went on Gaza, killing thousands, hundreds, Hamas got stronger. Hamas is now stronger in the West Bank, and we know that. And that is because there is still war on Gaza. So what we wanted to tell people is that we can have a different path, and that path isn't the one that the government is showing us right now. And because nobody was saying that, yet again, in the Israeli politics and politicians, we wanted to bring that voice. Now, we believe, and I think all of us know, that politics is about competition. If you have just one idea, and that is the only idea that people will hear, that is the only thing they can pick or they can point on it. And at times of war, people do become more radical, and people do want solution and want to hang on to something. But our politics, our politicians, only spoke of conquering Gaza, wiping out people from Gaza, expelling people from Gaza, as if that would be the solution. But it's not the solution, because Bibi Netanyahu said the same things the war before, and the war before, and the war before, and nothing had really changed, and people realized that after the 7th of October. So what we are trying to bring is a competition. We are bringing people a different message. We are saying different things. If we want to live in security, that security has to go hand by hand with independence to the Palestinian people. And that is the only way that we can really live. We don't want to survive in the land we are in. We want to prosper, and we do deserve to prosper. We deserve that prosperity. And that voice that we are speaking is giving people an alternative. And when you have an alternative, when you have a competition, you can choose. And when you can choose, you make it harder for the right-wing activists and the right-wing politicians to become stronger. And that is the main thing we have been going and doing. We're going out with asking for a ceasefire agreement that will bring the hostages back and also stop the killing of innocent people in Gaza. And believe me, our government had given up on the hostages. If it's for our government, they will leave them there to die. And unfortunately, we also know how many hostages have already died while being captive in Gaza by Hamas. So that voice, that alternative voice that we are trying to bring, has brought other people to the streets. We were able to have demonstrations calling out for a ceasefire, calling out for peace, a Israeli-Palestinian peace.
So many... Back in December, October, so 2 months after the war was Hanukkah. I think it fell in December this year. And there was something that was going around social media here in Canada and the US saying, if you call for a ceasefire, don't even bother wishing me a happy Hanukkah. In other words, if you call for a ceasefire, you may as well be anti-Semitic. Can you help us understand this? I'm going to pose it another way. some people say if you call for a ceasefire, it means you're letting Hamas remain in Gaza, and there's going to be more and more and more October 7th because Hamas has promised that. So explain that, and then I'll give you a question from the other direction.
So first of all, I think that calling for a ceasefire agreement and calling for Israeli-Palestinian peace is the most patriotic thing we can do. That's first. Now, the ones that are strengthening Hamas are the ministers in the Israeli government. And they want to do that. And I know they want to do that because they told us they want to do that. Smotrich said it before. He said, Hamas is an asset. That's what he said. Netanyahu has a similar quote. They want Hamas to be stronger because they don't want to get a solution. As we said before, Benjamin Netanyahu already told us his vision. His vision is to live by the sword forever. Now, if you want to weaken Hamas, let's look at history. When was Hamas at its weakest point, you know? In the 90s, during the Oslo Accords. Now, the Oslo Accords were far from perfect, don't get me wrong, but there was hope on the ground. There was hope for a different future in the land, and Hamas was at its weakest point back then. So if you want to eradicate this fascist ideology, you have to fight it with hope. The thing that eradicates fascism and racism is hope and peace. So what we are doing is the patriotic thing, and what they're doing is just tearing apart the Israeli society and really sacrificing all of us for their messianic vision. And that will be my answer.
Thank you. I'm hearing you talk, and you are talking with great humanity and conviction. And so many people here might be surprised to learn that the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement that claims to work for Palestine solidarity has tried to boycott Standing Together. Can you tell us a bit about that and what your response was?
Well, first of all, we didn't want a response because BDS movement doesn't really affect, our work inside of our society, because most of our work is inside of the Israeli society. But then we understood, what it was doing abroad by calling to boycotting us. And I'm going to answer it by giving you, just what's really happening right now. The right wing and really fascist messianic people who believe that there should be only one people in the land of Israel, Palestine, are organizing, mobilizing. They have so much money. They have people in power. They sit in the Knesset. They make coalitions. They do everything they can in order to spread their view and to just conquer. Okay, that's what they are doing. And what we are doing is basically giving a struggle to that vision. And we are the only Palestinian Jewish movement inside of Israel that is fighting to end the occupation, end the siege on Gaza, and stop this war, and find also equality inside of the Israeli society, because the Israeli society doesn't really have equality, and democracy is, we can argue about that for days and days. And then the right wing is doing all of that, and we are doing what we can do, and then comes, the BDS movement and says that we should be boycotted. We shouldn't be boycotted. Like, you can boycott, I don't want to tell you what to do. You can boycott, factories, manufacturers who bring how do you say, guns and rifles and military aid to Israel. You should boycott these factories. You should boycott everything that gives more money to destroying the lives of more people and killing more people. You should. But should you really be boycotting a movement that is working from inside of the Israeli society to change the politics inside of Israel? I think not. And if
May I add something?
Yeah.
I just want to stress how ridiculous it is. I mean, no, really. We don't talk about it a lot, but after October 7, we had to flee our offices. We received death threats. We still do. We went to the police. The police said, yeah, well, what can we do? Just do something. People are calling us traitors. People are saying that we are self-hating Jews, auto-anti-Semitic, and stuff like that. And we keep on fighting. I mean, we keep on fighting. We keep on talking with our society to convince them there is another way, to tell them that it's our interest. It's our interest, just like it is the Palestinian interest, to end the occupation and to stop the war and to go toward peace. And then people from abroad are coming and saying, yeah, but you're not pure enough, or something like that. It's a miracle that there is a peace camp in Israel still. It's a miracle, really. And we are trying to hold this miracle, and we are trying to make it stronger. Who are you boycotting? You're boycotting the peace movement? You're boycotting Palestinians who are fighting for their people? It's ridiculous, really. And as you can see, it makes me really, really angry, because it makes me think that it's not really about the people, for them. It's not really about saving lives. It's about purity politics. It's about ticking all the right boxes. We're not into that. We're into saving lives. We're into... Thank you.
Thank you. I do invite you to Google later, not right now, Standing Together's official response statement, which was tweeted, and you can send it around to your friends, and it's very articulate in countering the BDS ideational accusations, I guess. What is your vision for peace? You mentioned peace. Are you a one-state group, a two-state group, a confederal group? Do you have a particular approach, any approach? Tell us a bit more about that. Start with Rula.
Well, as a grassroots movement, we don't really have, like, if you look us up, you will not find any place that we say we support, one state or two state. That is not our mission as a grassroots movement. We don't sit down and just like draw a line on a map and say, this should be, this is Israel and that is Palestine. We don't. And also, I might say that right now, with everything that's happening back home, that is not a real question asked by people. Like, we have more immediate things that we need to work on. We need to stop the war. We need to understand what will be the day after. They're like more urgent questions that people are asking right now, so it's not a real question to people. But having said all that, what we do as a grassroots movement is we organize people. We bring people and we educate people on politics that say that if we want to live in this land, we should be all equal. We should all have freedom, and we should all have independence and liberty. And that is things that we want to have. And after the 7th of October, one of the things we've been doing is also trying to build that political power in people's mind, especially inside of the Israeli society, because we understand and we know what is the hegemony. We know who is, the stronger side. We understand that, there is a country called Israel. There is a Jewish society. And yes, it is more supreme than the Palestinian society. And we see that by laws that we have inside of Israel also. I'm not talking about the occupation or the siege on Gaza. And what we are trying to do while we are organizing people is really building that political will in people's mind to put pressure on our leaders, that they can also understand that when we sit down, when this war ends, and this war hopefully will end soon, any kind of agreement that should be made should take into consideration that both people living back home in Israel, Palestine, both of them deserve real equality, real peace, real security, real liberation, and yes, real independence. And when our leaders will sit down they can choose what they do want to do, but then you will have that will in people's minds to do the thing that is fair for both people. So no, we do not draw a line on a map, but we are working to bring other politics to the minds of the people, so can we, all of us, can be really free back home.
May I add something to
Yes,
that? Today marks the 45th anniversary to the signing of the peace agreement between Israel and Palestine, I wish. Israel and Egypt, today, 45 years ago. Thank you, it wasn't us. Thank you. But it was the people, and that's exactly the point. Menachem Begin, the prime minister back then, not Benjamin Netanyahu, surprisingly, he could never do that without the support of the majority of the Israeli society. He could never done that without that. So our task, our goal is to rebuild this political will toward peace, to build a movement that would be able to demand and then support any kind of solution, as long as Rula said, it would ensure all of us independence and justice and safety and prosperity. There are many good ideas, really. We'll accept every idea as long as it would really provide all of us the same rights. And it's, I think, a crucial task to build this political will.
And so what's the relationship between standing together and the political parties? What do you want people to do when they go to the ballot box? And not that we can necessarily do that, but it's useful for us to understand a little bit about the dynamic over there.
First, we want them to vote because it's important to vote. Standing Together is not a political party. We don't want to be a political party. I would love to see a party in Israel represented in the Knesset with the same values and the same ways of working like Standing Together. But many times when people want to change things, their first answer, the immediate answer is, let's form a new party. It's not going to happen. It's usually just wasting votes. In Standing Together, in the leadership of Standing Together, there are people from at least 5 different parties. So the fact that we are a movement enables us to bring people together also in the left and to work together and then to build power. We are working with many parties. We're cooperating with everyone who wants and agreed to cooperate with us. And when there are elections, we're doing get out the vote campaigns because it is important.
Excellent. Have there been tensions between the two of you or between other members in the group, and how have you worked through them? Have you ever had serious disagreements? Does it ever get heated?
Well, the only tension between both of us is when he takes my seat in the office, because we don't really have a big office.
It's the best seat.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, I don't know if you know, in May 2021, also yet again, missiles, war, there were too many demonstrations, there were riots, violence in our streets, especially in the mixed cities, and even people were killed. Some killed by other protesters, some shot by the police. And that was a very traumatic May 2021. And in May 2021, we had tension in the movement because it was, again, very polarizing. But the kind of tension is what do we do from this point? And it's kind of May 2021 gave us, a previous look on what could happen, unfortunately. But when the 7th, when October, when it happened, we were kind of ready. We were shocked. We were really traumatized by that day. But the first thing we did is understanding that we needed to, first of all, bring our people together and to give a safe place to speak, to share what was happening. Because in Standing Together, our activists, staff, leadership, we had activists who had, families kidnapped. by Hamas, others killed by the attack. And we also had members who, their family were killed by the bombings in Gaza. So we had, trauma, fear from all around, from both sides. And we wanted to give that a place, acknowledge what was happening. And I think 4 days after the 7th of October, we had a Zoom talk because there were no people at the streets. For a whole month, nobody went out. People were really scared. And in that Zoom talk, all we did was cry. Really, we just cried. And I think having 3 hours of people crying and sharing and knowing that the pain is mutual, the grief is mutual, the trauma is mutual, enabled us to, rise up stronger and really know what to do, what the next steps will be, because we recognized that that pain was really mutual. Both sides were suffering at that time, and it was, I think, one of the most courageous things we did, because we also know of many organizations who didn't have that first talk. And I'm talking about shared organizations, and I know this day how much, it really damaged the organization. And if I do want to say something, I know it's 5.5 months after, but we also seen that, abroad, communities stop talking to one another. Even people from the same community stop talking to one another. And I think, if we were able to do that, people should be able to do that also. The first step to really acknowledging, to knowing what to do, is to acknowledge the fear, the trauma, to talk about it, and then to know, okay, so what do we do next? So if you haven't done that yet, you should. Yeah.
I'd like to turn to the audience in a minute, but Itamar, I'll let you get in on that too.
So I just want to share a story. It's not about standing together stuff, but as I said before, immediately after October 7, we formed those Solidarity Guards. And I think it was 2 weeks after the Hamas attack, Rula and I, we went to Ramla. Ramla is a mixed city just outside of Tel Aviv Jaffa, very close to Tel Aviv Jaffa. We went to a meeting of the Solidarity Guard, of the local Solidarity Guard. There was something like 30 people, I think, over there, about half Palestinians, half Jews.
The audience might not be familiar with Solidarity Guard.
So as I said before, because we feared violence between Jews and Arabs in the mixed cities inside Israel, just like what happened in 2021, in May 2021, we formed those guards, groups of people on the ground, based on their home cities, that worked together in order to de-escalate the atmosphere, and they helped people, and they visited people that were hurt and stuff like that, and the idea was, again, to prevent the violence. And at that meeting, it was the first meeting of the Solidarity Guard in Ramla, and as I said, there were something like 30 people. And there were 2 women there that when we entered, we got late. We were late. They cried. They just sat there and cried and cried and cried. One was a Palestinian, and she told us she's crying because just the day before, 5, I think, of her family members were killed in a bombing in Gaza, and she cried. But she chose to come. I mean, think about it. The day before, she chose to come to meet other Palestinians, but also Jewish people, and in a Solidarity Guard, to think together what can they do in their hometown. The other woman who cried was a Jewish woman. And she cried because, I think, 3 or 4 days before that, a missile from Gaza hit her house and ruined her house. She was crying, and she chose to come. Think about that. Both of them had all the reasons in the world, not just not to come. They had all the reasons in the world to hate each other and to not believe in solidarity, but they chose to come. They showed the courage. And I'm thinking a lot about those two women since then, because sometimes it is hard. Sometimes we have arguments and we have disputes. But they showed us that this is the time for radical empathy. This is the time to remember that our destinies are intertwined. And you know what? That could be a beautiful thing. We can build a wonderful society together. And so if you ever need the courage to start a talk about all those very painful topics, think about those two women. If they can do that, all of us can do that.
I'd like to invite some questions from the audience. We have some New Israel Fund folks walking around with microphones. We will start with right there, and then, yes. Where's our mics? I'll let the mic folks find the people, and we'll take three questions at a time.
Did you call on someone to go first?
Why don't you just go match the mic to the person? Yeah, Siri, thank you. And maybe introduce yourself if you're so moved. And sure. Again, we welcome questions rather than speeches. But I'll give you a two-sentence lead up, and then your question. So 3 sentences total, and a haiku if possible.
My name is Ricky Miller. I just want to say thank you so much. You both give us hope, and we really need hope. My question is, please can you be concrete and tell us what can we do here to support your cause? What can we actually do?
Excellent. We'll take 2 more, and I'll.
Thanks so much for coming. My name is Matthijs Kronemeyer. I'm a Dutchman resident in Toronto. Can you tell a little bit about what you see on the religious spectrum, and in particular in terms of liberation theology and more religious movements that you could potentially see as allies? Do you see any? Thank you.
I'll repeat the question after. And one more for now. I'll just let you, microphone, crew choice.
Hi, I'm Dara Title. My question, which I hate being asked the same question in reverse about Canada, but why is the left so weak politically in Israel? Can you connect the dots between having hundreds of thousands of people marching a few months ago against a government and then having no political representation?
Great. I'm going to repeat the 3 questions.
Thank you.
What can we here in Canada do to support your efforts? Are there any religious groups in Israel or abroad that you see as allies? Christian groups, Jewish groups, Muslim groups that could help amplify your message, that you could work alongside? And finally, why is the Israeli left so weak, especially given the numbers who came to protest the judicial overhaul, and now so many are in support of the war, although they're not in support of Bibi?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think what you can do, and I'm going to be a bit blunt with this one, is help us with money. Yeah, it's hard for people to ask for money, but I'm gonna just explain. Back home right now, the right wing is so strong that it is campaigning about occupying Gaza. Okay, we have billboards where you have people from the West Bank, leaders from the West Bank, who are the only ones that you can really have any kind of agreements with them right now if you really want to weaken Hamas. We have billboards that have them dressed up as Hamas, as terrorists. And what they are doing is basically giving no hope and trying to bring their statement that there is no partner on the other side. And it's becoming stronger because they have a lot of power, they have a lot of money, they have control, and they have people. Now, we have people, but we don't have as much money. So the first thing you can really do is endorse us, is donate to us. And you can do that by just looking, I think there's maybe something you can donate through QR in here. Yeah, over there in the back, in the, yes, on the entrance. You can just donate once. You can become a friend also of Standing Together and donate monthly. And that would be a great help because we have the people, we organize the people, we build a different political story back home, but we also need money, and that helps us. So that is one thing.
Tell us a bit more about where funds go. So you mentioned billboards. Are you doing billboard campaigns the way the right wing was doing? What are you doing with the funds generally?
Generally, first of all, we have staff, people who work also in Standing Together. We have many organizers in fields, in campuses with the students, in different chapters all over the country. And what we are doing right now is build a peace movement, because we need a peace movement. And it will go to campaigns, to billboards, to media, to organizing people, to having more demonstrations. Like, there are many places that money can go for, but it's basically to empower us to do more and be more heard inside of the Israeli society. And that is an important thing. That is one thing. The second thing, what you can really do is, you know, we need pressure also from abroad. Yes, we are a grassroots movement that believes that the only one that can make a real change is our society. But also in politics, sometimes when other politicians from abroad put pressure on our government, it helps us. It gives us more space to work. When, you know, when others say that Israel should cease fire now, it puts pressure on our government, and we need that pressure because we need a ceasefire right now. It is very crucial for all of us back home to have a ceasefire. So you can go out, demonstrate, put pressure on your politicians, because every little pressure helps us back home.
May I double down on that?
Yeah, double down.
I mean, maybe, I don't know you personally, but maybe for some of you it can be frightening to criticize the Israeli government or to demand your government to criticize the Israeli government. But I think that's an act of love, that's an act of sympathy, that's an act of solidarity. If you believe in us, if you want us to succeed, if you want the Israeli society to survive, if you are our friends, please treat us with tough love. Friends should be honest with each other. Friends should be honest with each other. And when our government is taking on a disastrous path, you should demand your government not to assist it. And that's going to help us in our work in building a peace movement inside Israel. And that's a patriotic thing to do, because we have to remember the Israeli people are not one and the same as the Israeli government. Just like, by the way, the Palestinians in Gaza are not one and the same as Hamas. When you pick a fight with the Israeli government because you disagree with what the Israeli government is doing, you're doing that in favor, it benefits the Israeli society. So don't be afraid to criticize us, because that's okay to criticize us sometimes. That's really, really okay.
You're basically, I know you guys have been such a lovely audience, and I'm worried you're going to laugh because you're going to think that I'm saying something funny, but I'm actually not, but I don't mind if you laugh. I feel like crying with what you're saying, because I have felt so isolated by our Jewish community, and I don't know if you know what our Jewish community has email blasted out when our government in Canada did exactly what you said and called for a ceasefire and called for a return of the hostages and called for Hamas to lay down its arms. And our organized Jewish community, the Jewish Federation, sent out email blasts calling that shameful. We are under a lot of pressure here when we're trying to find community and fit in, and it is very, very heartening to hear you tell us how you can support you.
So maybe I can tell you that this resolution, just like what Senator Chuck Schumer from New York, from your neighbor from the South, said, all those things went a long way in Israeli society. A lot of people reacted. A lot of people were surprised a little bit, but it got them thinking. So it is important. And in Israel, it is, of course, the Israeli government doesn't like that. Of course, some people in Israel who are not in the government, they do not like that as well. But many, many people listen to that because they understood that it's not anti-Semitic. And you're not doing that because you're anti the Israeli society. You're doing that because you're worried and because you're in disagreement with the Israeli government. And it's helping us on the ground. So you don't have to be,
And maybe just a sentence for to really elaborate. I know we have more questions. I'm sorry. Yes, but just to elaborate because I know it's becoming more difficult in here. Just remember, before the 7th of October, people were protesting back home. 10 months, people were out there and protesting. So if people were there protesting because they didn't want that government, it should really resonate in here that the people who live back home are not the government. So criticizing the government is in favor of the people living in Israel right now. So just remember that.
Maybe I quickly answer the other questions.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
So regarding the religious...
the left. Religious
groups,
allies and Israeli
there are
left.
many religious groups inside Israel and also abroad that we are working with, some Jewish, some Muslim, some Christians, and of course also joint endeavors and initiatives. And it really helps, of course, because sometimes the Israeli left is portrayed as completely secular, completely Ashkenazi, completely middle upper class and stuff like that, and it really helps to break the barriers and to open the political imagination of the people in Israel, which is important. Regarding to the question, why is the Israeli left so weak? Well,
Where do we start?
now, it's hard to answer in a short answer to that question, although it's a very, very, very good question. I think we forgot where we came from in the Israeli left. I think we forgot that we were, for decades, for Israeli-Palestinian peace unashamedly, and we stopped talking about it. I think we forgot that many communities in Israel have shared interests. I think we stopped talking about equality, about social justice. We protested, but then we just went home. And because we stopped doing all that, we were not able, or we are not able anymore, to build new coalitions that will build a new majority in Israeli society. That's why, for example, Standing Together had a campaign to raise the minimum wage, because there are 1 million people around Israel who's earning only minimum wage, which is really, really, really low. And a lot of them are Palestinians. A lot of them are Israelis from Ethiopian descent. A lot of them are Haredic women, ultra-Orthodox women, who are highly marginalized in our society. And we decided to do this campaign, in order to raise the minimum wage, but also to show as a proof of concept that we can work together, we can build new coalitions. The problem of the Israeli left, I think, is that our political imagination is so closed. We need to widen this political imagination, and that means to work on the ground and building those such coalitions.
Thank you. Take 3 more and Crew's choice.
I'm wondering if you could speak to some challenges that exist in terms of pro-peace movements such as Standing Together, expanding and involving Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, such as, they might get in trouble if they became involved. That's just my question, because you would know that answer better than me. Thank you very much.
Great. We'll take 2 more.
Yes. Oh. Hello? Yeah, hi. My name is Joanne Clark, and people are talking about what we can do here, and I have no shame. So I'm going to announce an event. Sunday, April 21st at 10:30, Dr. Izzeldin Abileish, Palestinian-Canadian, the first Palestinian doctor to work in an Israeli hospital, who lost 3 daughters to an Israeli bomb, 2009, and has lost 30 family members since October 7th, is speaking at Trinity St. Paul's United Church at 10:30, and he is speaking on faith, action, and hope. I shall not hate.
Thank you.
Please come, all of you.
No question.
You're a natural organizer. Good for you.
Thank you so much for the brave work you're doing. Mediators tend to get 2/3 of the blows. You mentioned quite a bit about the women that show up. And oftentimes for peace to be successful, it is having women involved in mediations and in negotiations. And so I wanted to know, in terms of building that robust coalition on the left, how do you work with Women of the Sun and Women Who Wage Peace?
The first group, Women Who Wage Peace and?
Women of the Sun. Vivian Silver was involved in the first.
Women of the Sun. Okay, and we'll take one more question. Crew's choice, so I don't have to work hard.
Shalom, salam. My name is Yasmin. I spent a lot of time. First, I just want to thank you so much for being courageous. I know it's not easy. And I have to say, I got here late, and I was so encouraged by how many people are here. So I just want you to know that it's really heartening, not just what the work of the speakers are doing and the people that organized it, but everyone that's here. I spent 6 years, my family's Muslim, my family's Indian Muslim, my family's from South Africa. I dated an Israeli Ashkenazi Jew for 6 years. I spent a lot of time over there. I worked for Seeds of Peace. I worked fighting against settlements. I did a lot of different things. And what's happening now, I never thought I would witness it in my lifetime. And it's really important. And I know that there's, claims, like you said, BDS has their opinion, but I think it's important that what you're doing, I think it's really important. I just want to say how brave you are and that we need to support you. My question has to do with the future of the movement. So if we want to change the Israeli society, there's so many different demographics, and I think education is really important. I followed a scholar, an Israeli scholar, an academic named Nurit Peled El-Hanan, and also she talks a lot about the textbooks and how there's so much discrimination against Palestinians within Israeli textbooks. And I feel like if we really want to change the society, we need to do that. And right now, all the universities and the schools that were bombed in Gaza, there's like term scholasticide that some other Palestinian academics, I think one named Karma, and now recently there's a scholar who was kicked out, a Palestinian professor who's been in Hebrew University, Dr. Nadira Shahub Kevorkian, has been dismissed from the Hebrew University. It's just shocking to me that that says...
We'll get to it, so
yeah,
wrap up
that's
the
basically
question.
it. So that's the question, is how can we really work on education? And what is Standing Together's position on youth movements for that?
Excellent. So working across the Green Line and whether you're able to forge partnerships with Palestinians in the West Bank, and the role of women in the movement, and then some of the goings-on with academic freedom being cracked down upon. And it's, of course, interesting to ask about Israeli textbooks, because we hear in the Israel advocacy world, many people ask about Palestinian textbooks.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to answer the first question. We're a movement that works inside of the Israeli society. We do not organize or mobilize people in the West Bank, and of course not in Gaza, because Gaza has been under siege for 17 years. Our work is to transfer the Israeli society itself, the Palestinian and the Jewish citizens of Israel. We do have relationships with some activists in the West Bank, but we don't organize them. We don't really go inside of the West Bank and tell people what to do in the West Bank. But having said that, I think it's also important, if you ask what we can do as people who have, as a Palestinian and a Jewish Israeli, the work we are doing to ending the military occupation and control over the lives of millions of people in the West Bank is very important in order to let people eventually be really free in the West Bank. Because as you know, in the West Bank, there's a different set of rules for Palestinians, and it's very different from the ones that the settlers have. And as long as there is military occupation on the West Bank, I think it will be much more harder for Palestinians to organize or do anything, because they are really under occupation. And it's a different set of life back for us in the Israeli society. And I wanted to say something else, but I forgot, and I'm really sorry. But I had another sentence. And the other question was?
Role of women in the movement. And do you partner with Women Wage Peace? And I don't know the other one, Women Under the Sun.
The one is in Gaza, right? Or is it in the West Bank, Women of the Sun? Your question. Sorry. West Bank, right?
I just know that on October 5th, they had organized a joint protest in Jerusalem.
First of all, we do have partnership with the Women Wage for Peace. And lately we've been having a campaign together, which is called, calling out for a ceasefire and a peace, both with Women Wage for Peace. And we've had, actually tomorrow, we're going to be having a march in the north with them, and it's been led by women towards having a ceasefire and a Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement. So we do have a good relationship with them. But again, we don't have relationships, we don't really organize people in the West Bank. That is not the work we do. Our work is to make change inside of the Israeli society. That is what we do. That is our mission.
And regarding education, I agree. It's extremely important, and there won't be long-term change without us changing our educational system. But we can't do it all in standing together, although we really want to. So we're not doing educational work. We are organizing also teenagers, and we are the biggest forces in the universities in Israel and in the colleges in Israel, and we're doing a lot of work there on the ground. There are organizations who are, preparing the plans when we'll have the power, so we'll be able to change our education system, and our job is to build this power, so we'll be able to implement those plans.
Good. We have time for 2 more questions. Maybe someone here in the 4th row in the middle.
Good evening. Thank you so much for your humanity and your courage. My name is Jill Andrew, and I'm a member of Provincial Parliament for St. Paul's. My question is a very short one. In my many years in journalism, we were always taught that journalism is to be objective and to be neutral. As a politician now, I sit back sometimes and I see the rampant biases that often infiltrate journalism. I'm wondering if you had a chance to speak to the Canadian media, if you were in one of our newsrooms, what tips would you give journalists on how they cover this humanitarian crisis? Thank you.
One last question. And while you're bringing the mic to the questioner, I'll just add, I don't know if Joel Harden got a shout out as well, but another MPP from my personal riding back home in Ottawa. So thank you again for all the elected officials who came. And I'll just tackle, oh yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I want to echo everybody and say thank you for your courage. It's so inspiring. My name is Daniela Vinitsky-Mooney, and I have a question about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. I know that Standing Together has been trying to get aid in, and I was wondering if you could update us on that, and also what we can do as a society here in Canada to help support those efforts.
Great. So we'll start with okay. Okay, go for it. Go for it.
So my name is Maya, and I'm a Jewish Israeli Canadian, and I'm also a victim of Palestinian terrorism since I was 6 years old. But I've always wanted peace. Every time I went to the Kotel, that was my wish in the Kotel for peace. And I've heard you I've listened to you speak out tonight about the Israeli government. And so forth, which I don't disagree with, and about your lived experience. Thank you for sharing that. My question to you is, I haven't heard you speak out about the leadership and the lack of government on the other side, because we're saying we want to make peace, which I do as well, but with who? There's no partners for peace at the moment. So that's my question to you.
So let's, we need to end on a slightly actionable, uplifting note. So I want to take Daniela's question last because it's about what we can do to help with the humanitarian crisis right now. But so let's start with the terms. What kind of terms would you use? How would you describe what's going on if you were writing articles for the Canadian media? And then is there no partner on the other side? How do we make peace with that assumption, and then Daniela's question about what we can do right now to ease the humanitarian crisis.
Regarding Julia, I don't really know how to give advice to journalists. But I think the important thing is just to tell the stories of people on the ground. It's not about all those big terms and terminology and all those stuff. Just find the stories, share the stories, let the people speak. Bring to the Canadian audience, the Canadian society, the voices of Palestinians and of Jewish people in the land. That would be, I think, the best thing to do. So that's regarding that. The other question?
Is there a partner on the other side?
Do you want to answer? I can answer. Go for it.
I do want to emphasize that we speak about the Israeli government because that is the government we live under and the one we want to affect and change its politics. So that is first of all. But if we hadn't said it before, I think it's obvious to all of us that Hamas is not a partner of peace. Hamas does not want peace. But it's also obvious for us that our government doesn't want peace. But at the same time, both of these governments and leaderships are arguing together and trying to make any kind of a deal right now. So they are still in contact. Do we have a ceasefire? How many hostages will be back? They're some kind of still having power over our lives right now. That is also a fact. And saying that there is no partner, I think, is the wrong term to say, because there is a partner. We just need to reach out for the right one. What's been happening the last 20 years is both of us, also Israelis and Palestinians, are victims of the policies that we have. And I think you all know that Hamas came to power in 2006 and then 7, and then a year after the blockage on Gaza began, and it hadn't stopped until even now. And people in Gaza haven't had the time or the ability to even elect a different leadership. And I don't know if you know, there was a poll done in Gaza before the 7th of October, and people were asked, do you believe in Hamas as a leadership? More than 70% of the people said no. But they weren't given the opportunity also to have any kind of elections. And part of it is because the Israeli government is still strengthening Hamas, even now, even now, when there is no ceasefire, when they are still bombing Gaza, and we all know that, with each and every bomb on Gaza, Hamas becomes stronger in the West Bank. And that is another act of our government to weaken, the authority, the Palestinian authority that we see in the West Bank, that can be the only partner right now and the only one that can lead any kind of different solution. So it's kind of these both extremists are feeding one another, and both of us are stuck in the middle with no real solution. That is why when we organize people in our society, in the Israeli society, we organize them to build, a different politics, a political will in people's minds. And that is what we do inside of Israel. And I'm so sorry that, I don't think it is even fathomable to think that people in Gaza can retaliate right now, or even go to elections, because also 70% of Gaza is under destruction and there is still bombing and starvation. So it's a very different. So we are the ones that still have the power to make any kind of change, because we are the ones that right now are not under bombings. And that is what we are working on day after day after day after day.
I would love to share a story about this, but first maybe we'll answer the
answer the question, and then a story, and then we'll wrap. And then I'm going to call up, after your story, I'll call up John and Yafa.
Regarding the humanitarian crisis, I think two things. Donate. There are organizations you can donate, and they are trying to deal with to help with the humanitarian crisis, and it's extremely important to do that. And second, I think you should demand your government to do more in order to deal with this humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in front of our eyes. We try to do our part. As you said, we sent convoys to Gaza. We were blocked by the army, but that's an extremely important thing to do. And if I may, I would like to share a story.
Share a story, and then I'll call up John and Yafa.
Something like 16 or 17 years ago, I finished my national service, and I moved to live in Kibbutz Be'eri. Might of you, some know, Kibbutz Be'eri is in the Gaza envelope, very close to Gaza. I moved there because I had a friend there, and he offered me a job. And this friend was the son of the late Vivian Silver. As I can hear, some of you know Vivian from Canadian descent, a peace activist, a leader in the peace movement in Israel, the founder of Women Wage Peace. And every Saturday night, the dining room was closed. So we went to her and her husband, her late husband, Louis, house, and we ate together, and we spoke. And since then, I met Vivian here and there in protest, and I'm still a friend of her two sons. And after October 7, we first thought she was kidnapped to Gaza. We then discovered she was murdered in her house. And we all went to the funeral. And one of the eulogies in the funeral was written by a Palestinian man from Gaza. He couldn't be there, of course, so someone read it for him. And he spoke in his eulogy, or wrote in his eulogy, how on the day of October 7, they texted each other. He asked her, "How are you doing? Are you safe?" She answered, and he wrote, it was heartbreaking, that the thing he regrets the most is that he never told her, never wrote her that he loves her before she dies. And she died. And that was a devastating moment in a devastating period, but it was also kind of amazing to think that among all the pain and suffering and hatred a Jewish woman and a Palestinian man can still believe in peace. And for me, that's the definitive proof that we can do better, that we are better than our governments. The Israeli people are better than the Israeli government. There's hope in the Israeli society. The Palestinian society is better than Hamas, and there's hope, and there are partners in the Palestinian society. And so I would like you to spread this message that you can pick a side. You should pick a side, but you should pick the side of the people, of the Israeli and the Palestinian people together, because peace, a just peace, is our shared interest. That's what we are trying to do on the land, back home. And please share this message. And also, yes, please support us. Please help us. Please believe in us. Please, we're asking you, do not leave us alone. We need your help and support. Thank you very much.
John and Yafa want to come up to close us out.
Wow. Thank you, Rula and Itamar. Thank you for the hard and necessary work you're doing every day. And thank you for bringing your transformational vision here to us in Canada. We're really hungry for this. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you. My name is John Meadow. I'm a Jewish Canadian and American citizen living here in Toronto. I first encountered Standing Together movement in 2019 as a Naomi Hazan Fellow with the New Israel Fund. We were at what was called an activist speed dating event in Tel Aviv. And I know it sounds kind of weird. But I sat down at a table. We were rotating through tables, spending about 15 minutes with different NIF grantees. And I sat down at a table with Sally Abed, with maybe 4 or 5 other fellows from the other countries that were participating. And it was a very short conversation. But what I heard from Sally that day really resonated, and it really stuck with me. Here I heard a vision of shared democratic citizenship. I heard about a deeply strategic movement that was focused on building authentic partnerships based on shared interests, and a movement that understands, as we heard today, how the small wins scale to the big wins and build the new coalitions for change. So when Rula and Itamar speak, I hear a powerful vision for the present and for the future. And in the wake of October 7th, Standing Together's message has inspired millions around the world. People are hungry not only for a message of hope, but for practical steps, the practical steps that can be taken to build a new majority for peace and equality, and we see this in Standing Together. So for all of these reasons, I'm proud to be a member of Friends of Standing Together Canada. We're the Canadian link in a rapidly expanding global network of supporters for Standing Together, and through Friends of Standing Together, we have the opportunity to truly globalize this movement, to support the work that Rula and Itamar are doing every day on the ground, and to support all of the members in the work every day on the ground. So I just want to ask everyone to please come visit us in the back on your way out. We have literature about Friends of Standing Together. There are great t-shirts available. And I now want to ask my friend and fellow friend of Standing Together, Yafa, to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mira. Thank you, Rula. Thank you, Itamar. Bravo عليكي Rula. Wallah shatura. And Itamar, habibi, Itamar. Wallah habibi, wallah. I'm just saying I really love them in Arabic. Okay. My name is Yafa Sakija from Yafa. I was born in Toronto, and I'm a Canadian. Why am I here? Trigger warning, but I'm a massive fan of standing together. And I want to explain why I, a Palestinian citizen of Canada and a daughter and a granddaughter of Nakba survivors, has chosen to come and stand together in solidarity with this phenomenal movement. All four of my grandparents left Yafa in 1948 of May. Yes, the Nakba. My father's parents left their 50 acres of oranges. They bribed a plane, a cargo plane, to fly to Cairo, like many are trying to evacuate. My father was born there May 29th, 1948, premature, underweight. My mother's family, their villa on the beach was under attack. Based on the eyewitness accounts, it is assumed it was the Haganah. I apologize if I triggered anybody, but I share this story as a precursor to why I'm here and standing together. While the history of my family is paramount to my identity, and it's arguably the reason why I make most of the choices in my life, because I am propelled. My first name is Yafa. They stamped my ancestral trauma on my head, and they said, remember. I said, okay, my God. But I still decide, because I insist on honoring my legacy, honoring my grandparents by moving forward in solidarity with Jewish people, in solidarity with Israelis for their human rights, with my human rights too, in solidarity together. And I want to be in solidarity against anti-Palestinian racism. I want to also be in solidarity against anti-Jewish racism in Toronto and Canada. And 100 years ago, my ancestors had eyewitness firsthand history, watching some of the armed resistance that Palestinians chose, okay? So 100 years later, I stand here saying, 70 years ago, my family renounced violent methods. And 30 years ago, the PA also renounced violent methods. And I stand here to say, enough. So I respect everybody who asks questions. I respect Yasmin. I respect Maya. I respect Yara. And I say, of course we must ask these questions, of course. And we put down armed struggle a long time ago, for goodness sakes. So I know that so much of the Palestinian existence is not fair. And at the same time, I say, what choices and tools do I have to use to obtain equal rights and equal human rights for me and for you? What tools do I have? I know it's not fair that some of my Palestinian cousins are still stateless and still have no passport. However, I do have family that are Palestinian citizens of Israel. And guess what? They get their hair done at the Israeli coiffure and they say Todah before they go to vote in the Israeli Knesset, because that is the choice that we make. That is the choice, to participate in the society, to vote. My God, vote. Palestinian citizens of Israel have a passport and the right to vote in the Knesset. And I know this is an important path to achieving equal human rights for both Israelis, both Jews and Palestinians and Muslims and Arabs. And after the terrible events of October 7th, the events when Gaza was under bombardment, by mid-October, people were asking, am I okay? Do I have family in Gaza? And while I have to tell you the truth, this is the honest-to-goodness truth, and you have to hear me out. While I feel like all the Ghazawi people are my cousins, because everybody from Yafa walked south to 1948, except we had a little bit of cash in the home, we could bribe a plane and get out of there. Yes, I feel like everybody in Gaza is my cousin, but when people ask me, do I have family in Gaza, I did have a single family in Gaza. And who was that person? Thank God they're home now, but that was a hostage that was taken by Hamas. My family. Yes, half and half. What do you say? Shatzi, how do you say half and half? Hetzi. So when I said I have family, yes, my family is a hostage. So of course I'm empathizing. I'm a mother, I'm a boy mom. So of course I'm gonna empathize with the mothers, with the Israeli women. I'm gonna listen to them and believe them. And of course I am empathizing with the Palestinian women right now who are giving birth in Gaza without any medication. And all of it shatters my heart into a million pieces. But all of you, this is the story that brought me here to standing together, because in November, when I saw that New York Times article, I thought, yes, of course we have to stand together. And so before we get to housekeeping, the last thing I will say, before I ask you to open your wallets and donate $1 a month to Standing Together, just like I do, it's time that we repeat everything that Rula and Itamar and Alon Lee and Sally say. There's 14 million people on the land, and none of them are going anywhere. None of them are going anywhere. So it's time we demand equal justice and humanities for both Israelis and Palestinians, for Jews and Muslims, and the Christians and the Druze, and the agnostics and the atheists too. Maybe not the pagans. I'm just kidding. The pagans are okay. So, John, thank you, and let's talk about some housekeeping, John.
Thank you very much, Yafa, and thank you for the work you're doing to build up Friends of Standing Together in Canada as a Jewish and Palestinian initiative. So just a few housekeeping items before we go. First of all, I just want to thank again Rula and Itamar. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Mira. Thank you, NIFC, for hosting us. I want to give a big shout out again to the elected officials who are here tonight, to Minister Yara Sachs, to MPPs Jessica Bell, Jill Andrew, and Joel Hardin. Also want to let you know that in addition to the Friends of Standing Together table in the back, there's also a table for our other co-presenter for the evening, Heart to Heart. Please check them out. And last but not least, for those of you who are in your 20s and 30s, there's going to be a casual get-together after this at Jack Astor's, which is right at Bloor and Yonge. It's on Yonge, one block south of the library. So everyone in their 20s and 30s is welcome. And you can find Alex if you have any questions. Alex, are you there? He's in the back. Great, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening. Wait, sorry, there's one more thing. Back to Yafa.
We're going to take a group photo, please, if possible. If you don't want to be in the photo, no worries. You can come to the side. If you do want to be in the photo, this says Arabs and Jews together. So if you would like to hold it up, we're going to take a group photo. Everybody from the back 5 rows, please come into the center here so we can fill the space. And thank you very much. Thank you, New Israel Fund. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Mira. Thank you, Itamar. Good evening.